This is Royal New Yorker with RivalNewYork.com. I have RJ with us. We're going to be talking about catching today, so we have a catcher's preview. We're going to start it right off by throwing it to RJ. What's your catching strategy? And, think about it from both perspectives, both rotisserie and a points league.
Yeah, so with the catcher position, just in general, in years past, it's really top-heavy in terms of, Buster Posey or Jonathan Lucroy at the top, and then the rest of there's a big drop-off after that with the other catchers. In rotisserie leagues, you look for more kind of balance across the 5 categories offensively, batting average and steals, home runs, RBIs, and runs. With points, you get points for different things such as walks that rotisserie doesn't take into account, as well as you get penalized for things like caught stealing and strikeouts. So you want, in general, guys that don't strike out, that get on base. On base percentage is a really big thing when it comes to points leagues. But going back to the catcher position, I think there's a top 4 and tier, which is going to be Posey, Jonathan Lucroy, Gary Sanchez, and Kyle Schwarber. I think those 4 are clearly a cut above the rest of the catchers. And then looking down the catcher rankings list, I think this year, more so than the past, the catcher position is really, really deep. I think you can get a guy like a Russell Martin or a Yadier Molina that we were talking about before in the later rounds that can get you 10 to 15 home runs and decent amount of runs and RBIs. So overall, a pretty deep position, but I think those top 4 guys may be worth reaching for this year.
Okay, so I know we talked about sleepers before the segment. Who is your sleeper for this upcoming year?
So my sleeper is going to be Derek Norris of the Washington Nationals. I think he has an opportunity to play in a really loaded lineup there in Washington with Jason Worth and Bryce Harper and Daniel Murphy. He has had some good years in the past, 10 to 15 home runs. Has problems staying healthy, but I think overall, he'll be he'll have a chance to produce if he gets the at bats. Watch out. How about you, Lee? What do you think about sleepers?
I mean, my sleeper at this point has to be Travis d'Arnaud. You're wearing the Mets shirt, so I figured I'd give you a shout out. I'm not your typical optimistic Mets fan that feels that every Mets player is going to be a top in fantasy, even though I did trade for David Wright last year. And I still won the league, so it didn't matter. And I did trade Will Myers, which was definitely not a smart move in a keeper league. But yeah, Travis d'Arnaud, I think that if anybody watched closely, the first 10 to 15 games, he was on. He was hitting close to a 280, 290 average, and then all of a sudden, as usual, the injuries hit. And at that point, he regressed. You expected that, but he did come back, and he just was scared. I mean, anybody who watched him, we were in the playoff hunt, and he just would get up there. You were lucky if he hit the ball out of the infield. It was almost it was like, really? And then the Mets looked at Plawecki. He did nothing. He's starting off once again with a focus of being the starting catcher. They brought back Rene Rivera. Rene is not he's not going to be winning a batting title or a home run title anytime soon. So he's in there for defense. They brought in a catching coach from the Arizona Diamondbacks, who I believe was their bench coach. And he is a specialist. So the one issue that the Mets had last year was that they didn't actually have a real catching coach. They did, but they lost their catching coach to a benching position out in a bench coach position out in, with the Dodgers. So they finally now have another catch, and you could actually see that. I mean, they couldn't even have d'Arnaud catch Syndergaard because people were running around the bases. That was not the case the year before. So I think the combination of figuring out his mental issues with the actual catching responsibilities is going to transition him to getting back to where he can hit, and you're going to actually see him put out 15, 17 home runs and hit for a decent average. So that's where I'm looking towards. And trust me, we don't have him in the top 12. We're not crazy, but I do think he could be considered a sleeper because most drafts he won't even be drafted in. One of the things I wanted to mention that I think people just need to pay attention to is, as RJ mentioned, it's a deep, deep, deep catching position. And we were actually talking about every single position seems to be deeper and deeper. It's like you don't have that position where you're like, let me get that one shortstop that's available or those 2-3 shortstops. Right. It's deep across the board. So a couple of the players catching that I wanted to mention were Tom Murphy from Colorado. They're expecting him to come in and hit 20 home runs. I mean, that you gotta listen for that. You got Matt Wieters, who's not on a team. I've personally heard potentially he might show up in the Nationals, and that could disrupt things for Derek Norris, but he might not. He might end up being, do the Stephen Drew route and get signed in July, which would not be good because we saw what happened to Stephen Drew after waiting it out because he wanted a certain amount of money. And then you got to also think about Mike Zunino from Seattle. He was considered a top 10 potential last year, and then he just didn't perform. Hit at a 200, near the Mendoza line. And then I do have another person on here. Oh, and obviously Stephen Vogt. I mean, he just quietly, because of his first base eligibility, performs, and nobody really pays attention to him. But he puts up top 10 numbers, so he's not in our rankings. But you should focus in on him. Got to look at our notes. The last thing I want to mention: who's your player to target?
Player target for me, I play in a lot of rotisserie leagues. I think Lee plays in more head-to-head points leagues. But from a rotisserie standpoint, you love stolen bases. Those are valuable. Those are like gold. And JT Realmuto is the only real catcher that can give you double-digit steals. So he had 12 last year. I can see him breaking 15 this year. He's only 25 years old. So I think he'd be my player to target in the middle rounds once the top 4 come off the board.
Okay. My player to target in a points league is probably going to be your Russell Martin, Yadier Molina, just because of the fact that I like to wait and wait and wait and wait. Some of those other catchers there. However, it all comes down to whether you're doing an auction-style draft or you're doing, a snake draft. If the player falls and he's the best value, you have to think about it. And I think Gary Sanchez could actually be that. Not, right now I'm doing a keeper league, and that's where my mindset is right now. And I'm pretty sure Sanchez is not going to be available. But we ranked him what did we rank him? 3?
Yeah.
We ranked him 3, and yeah, that's a little high. He's going to cost a lot of money. But if people start realizing he had such a small grouping of at bats, I think it was under 200 at bats. Yes, he put up 20 home runs, but, I mean, think about it. The number of bats weren't there. They're going to be scared off. Plus, his minor league numbers don't really back up the performance he had. So you could see him slip to the mid-rounds. And if that happens, you should hop on him. But, again, my strategy is going to be a Molina, Martin at the end. Yeah. And, honestly, if they go too early or they go for too high of a cost, you're not going to see me taking them there. So, either way, we're in a league together. Hopefully it doesn't steal that from me. But either way, this is Royal New Yorker and RJ signing off. This is our catching segment. Check back in later this week. We're going to be doing first base. And we will do an overall rankings for you to track along with.